I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and if you do, remember, click the bell and subscribe. Welcome to In the Kitchen with Laura, and today's project is going to be green tomato pie. And before I get into the hows, let me just tell you a little bit about why I'm doing it. Now, this happens to be one of my signature dishes, and that is because I used to work at Usher's Ferry Historic Village, and an event I helped create was a pie auction whenever we had reenactors camping overnight. And so we try and come up with interesting and different pies. After all, nobody is going to pay much for one of 12 apple pies. So I thought to myself, I remember in one of the Little House books that Ma was trying to use up something green, and she was making a pie with green pumpkins. Well, this was when I was in college, and I didn't bother to look it up, and I had it in my head it was green tomato. So I started to make green tomato pies because of that, and this is based on a recipe that I got, but I have adjusted it to make it a little bit more about what I like. And so today we are going to, in honor of Ma's green pumpkin pie, we are going to make green tomato pie. And the ingredients, you want 3 or 4 green tomatoes. Now, at this time of year, when they're starting to give up on the ones turning red, or they're just sick of all of them all of them being red, then it's a pretty good time to find some. Your ideal tomatoes for this are going to look as much like an apple as possible. So you want round ones over oblong ones. And you're going to want more than 3 to 4 because this really works best if the seeds haven't developed. And sometimes you have to just use some with seeds or cut them out. But if you have a few more than 3 or 4, you'll have enough to try different things. Then I've got a pie crust, and I didn't show making the pie crust because that can be a whole episode in itself. And for ingredients, we've got 1 cup of sugar, and this is actually my great-grandmother's measuring cup, so I thought I'd get it out today in honor of the event. So we've got a cup of sugar, we have 1 tablespoon of flour, and 2 tablespoons of cider vinegar, and you can smell that in the real vinegar smell, but there's also a lot of apples too, and Laura people will know that we use that a lot for making our ginger water. Alright, next we have 1 tablespoon of butter cut into slices, and 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, or to taste. This is one you can do more or less, and some people substitute nutmeg. And then for the top, I've got 1/8 of a teaspoon of cinnamon mixed with a teaspoon of sugar, and then mixed well together to decorate the top. So with that, I'm going to move these aside. Other equipment you might need are measuring spoons to measure this out, a cutting board, a knife, and a spoon. And if you're doing this someplace like I am, then you're going to also want to have a bowl to put what you cut up out of the tomatoes in that are your reject pile. And actually both of these dishes were some of my grandmother's wedding presents, so I broke them out too from the 40s. So we're going to, oh, and I already washed the tomatoes. Now basically what you're wanting to do with this is to cut them so they look like wedges of apple. because if you do this properly, let's see, there's a lot of seed. If you do this properly, you'll be able to fool people into thinking that these are actually apples. So you want it to look as much like apples as you can. Like this piece here, you can see that really looks a little bit like an apple. You want more of this white stuff and less of it that's gone to seed, that does not look apple-like at all. So let me try the other side of this, if any of it cleans up. So this is an ideal example of what you want. If you possibly can find it, you still want it this white color as opposed to, say, this, which has got a lot of seeds. And so the closer you can find to this, the more convincing your pie is going to be. So, this is more than we're going to need. So we're going to go through and kind of pick our the best ones we have. I mean, look at that. There's no way you're going to think that isn't an apple. And we're not trying to, our goal, it's not trying to make it as good as a high quality apple pie would be, because you're not going to make it. But this is going to be, if we do it right, close to what a store-bought apple pie would be like. So if you see a lot of seeds in one and you think that's still going to be one of your best, pull them out if you can, just because apples don't have seeds like that. And even though it's less obvious once it's cooked, you really don't want to give the game away, because I really have had people think that it was apple pie, which is the most fun part of doing it. We have a decent amount that looks pretty good. Now, there isn't really a set number because it's just supposed to be 3 or 4 tomatoes cut up of basically medium size. So just sort of pick over it until it kind of fills up your pie pan. And you may want to do a smaller pie pan if you can, just because really, while this is pretty darn good the first day, it doesn't hold very well. And sometimes after you think you've got them all done, you have to go back and do a few more just to fill out the pan. But basically you just want enough to, how much normal filling you'd put in if you were doing a normal fruit pie. I think I may cut up one more just to see what happens. Yep, this one you can see is even red on the inside. That happens too. Alright, so after all that cutting, I ended up with, well, about the equivalent of 3 to 4 tomatoes that look sort of a little bit like apples. And here are the rejects, so you can see the difference. But that's why I say you want a lot more than 3 to 4 before you do your cutting. If you're trying to fool people. If you're telling people it's green tomato pie, it probably doesn't make much difference, although it still will make a better pie the less red and the less seeds you've got. Alright, now, you can use a small bowl for this, but because, you know, we're trying not to make more things to have to wash, I'm going to put the flour and the cinnamon, the straight cinnamon, in here, and I'm going to stir it up. And you're just going to stir it so the cinnamon's actually your best that because you want it to have a standard color all the way through, not swirls of white and brown. So once you've done that pretty well, it should look something like that. And you can just dump it in if you like, but I really like to spoon it in because that way you just have a little bit more control about equaling it out, because you really do want it to be fairly equal. When someone bites into the pie, it should hopefully be fairly standard. Now I'm going to put in the cider vinegar. And then you have a choice. You can either stir these up or leave them where you placed them. And I'm going to do a little gentle stir. And you're going to try for roughly flat for when you put the top on. I think that's pretty good. Okay, so then I'm going to take the butter, and we are also going to kind of divide that up. I had it sliced, but I had it sitting here a while, so it isn't the easiest to divide. It's kind of melting, but that's okay. We'll just work with it. It's going to eventually all melt anyway. And then my assistant off screen is going to hand me something to wipe my hands because she can't stand it anymore. Just call me Martha Stewart. Those unseen assistants are big help. Alright, so I'm going to unroll the top of the pie. Now, I like lattice pie, but that's something that goes in and out of style. And honestly, for this particular pie, rather than trying to lattice the crust or do anything fancy, you're kind of trying to hide the fact that it is not apple pie. So you want it to be people to see as little of what's going on as possible. And then we're going to go around the edge and get rid of the extra. Now, there's different ways to do that. You can just pinch it. You can use a fork. There's a special tool you can use that'll make a pretty ruffle edge. But the main point is to make sure that the top and the bottom crusts stick together. You have, when this gets done, extra crust sitting here. And you have some options of what to do with that. You can just throw it out. It is what Laura and Mary got their little pie crusts made out of, what was left over after Ma had gotten the big pie crusts done. I'm going to just move that aside. I'm going to take my knife and we're going to cut holes, and since there's already a hole there, we'll kind of use that as a model. And you can do the slits in, whatever pattern you like. I'm going to take the dough, now I'm going to take the cinnamon sugar mixture, and I'm just going to scatter it over. You could also brush it with butter if you wanted. There's, other things you could do. Whatever you would normally do on a pie to decorate it, you can do it on this. And with that, I think this is ready to go in the oven. And about an hour later, it's done. It's about between 40 and 50 minutes to cook, and at 400 degrees, if you're using an oven where you can set the temperature. You want to look for the liquid coming up through the slots to be boiling so you know it's done. And my mother wanted to add the comment that I cut way too many slats and you only need a few. So with that, let's see if it looks like an apple pie. And there you go. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of In the Kitchen with Laura and our tribute to Ma's using the green pumpkin, even if we used green tomatoes instead. When you were a pioneer, you had to use up every single bit of food, and finding ways to use up green tomatoes or pumpkins, whether it's in pies or something else, was something that was just a common everyday part of life. So I hope you'll try and make your own green tomato pie real soon and see if you can convince anybody that it's really at least store-bought apple. Now I want to remind you all to check out our other In the Kitchen videos and posts on the Trundlebed Tales blog. And look for us all around the web for more videos right here on this channel, for podcasts on Blog Talk Radio, and or on social media for Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And wherever you go, remember, click the bell and subscribe. Of sugar. uh, 1 tablespoon butter cut into slices, and 1 teaspoon or so cinnamon. This is to taste. And then I had 1/8 of a teaspoon of cinnamon with